Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner, and this is stage 14 of the Tour de France. 192 kilometers, about 120 miles in length, and 5 categorized climbs. It's the last climb you really want to focus on, Mende. It's 3 kilometers long, super steep, with 15% pitches in it. And the first time I was lucky enough to do this climb in a bike race, it was Tour of Midi-Libre way back in the day in 1998. That race has since been canceled. But at that point in time in the 90s, that was one of the races that was pre-set you up for the Tour de France. It was about 5 weeks before the Tour de France, if I remember correctly. It was close enough, though, that I was on very good form racing against the Festina team. And on this day, when we went up this climb, I had a great result, was still about 6th on the general classification, when after this stage, the FDJ directors came up to me. Let me remind you, it was Mark Matteo, who's still one of the directors and the DS and the main manager for FDJ still, some 25 years later, is when they came up to me and said, "Chris, you're going to do your first Tour de France this year in 1998. Got all excited that night, and then later on the last stage of Midi-Libre, I crashed in this massive crosswind section when it was Yevgeny Berzin, the Giro d'Italia winner, who was my teammate at the time, this all echeloned out with just Festina across the road and myself as the last rider in the echelon sections. We're heading towards the coast, south of France, and then my teammate Yevgeny Berzin came up. I moved over. There was a little bit of weave in the front group there from all the Festina guys avoiding something. And because we're coming down the road with these trees planted on each side, there was no place for me to go off the road, or maybe I hit a tree. I went straight into the back of my teammate, Yevgeny Berzin, and broke my wrist right here. And that was the wishes for the first Tour de France ever. It came true on the day before, and then it was crashed out on that day, broke my arm, lost doing any chances of doing the 1998 Tour de France. Spent the rest of the time watching it in Nice, walking around Nice with a broken arm and watching the Tour de France on TV. So every year since, I've done it during Paris-Nice, and now I've done it during the Tour de France in 2010, and that's why I brought the 2 jerseys up here. This stage is always exciting. It's hard because it's always lumpy and bumpy throughout the course, and like I said, there's 5 categorized climbs, never a flat section on this race. Sometimes you're in the trees. On the climbs, you'll come out and there'll be plateaus where you get crosswinds that can devastate the field, and then you'll drop down a long, let's call it about a 20, 25 kilometer descent all the way down into the climb before you start Mende proper. Now remember, you'll go up to the top, 3K long, and then you'll drop down for about a kilometer and a half, and then you make a left turn. You'll be on the airport strip and you'll sprint to the finish. Today's race is going to be exciting, so strap your seatbelts. When I sat down and we were discussing it at NBC, when the racing gets going, we're going to see 20 guys thereabouts get away. Now I'm almost crying in the seat because I remember in 2010 this race being epic and it was full gas all day long, and it's what I expected here at NBC. And instead I'm watching 20 guys go up the road. And then all of a sudden when the camera fans back, it's race leader Jonas Vingegaard, and he's trying to close a gap because he's been caught napping. Up front, there's about 30 guys up there. They're trying to bridge up to the 20 guys or so that was originally in this break, and then everything starts coming back together as we see race leader Jonas Vingegaard bridging across from all the gaps all the way up, because it's in the second group of 30 guys. It's Tadej Pogačar up there. He's got some company with Wout van Aert, and later we found out it was actually Wout van Aert that caused that split, trying to bring the field back up to that group of 15 or 20 up the road, and instead he split off Tadej Pogačar. Tadej Pogačar looks back. He sees the race leader back there wearing yellow. He's pretty easy to spot, and Tadej Pogačar gets on the pedal and starts accelerating, throwing in a massive attack right here on the first KOM of stage 14 of the Tour de France. It's going to be a keeper on this stage, and it's going to be exciting. Now the rest of the time, there's full gas back there as that front group gets brought back, and then up front when we come into the second KOM, it's Gaskin, and from the Cofidis rider wearing the polka dot jersey. He's accelerating hard, and then it's Quinn Simmons, Trek Segafredo, that's going over the top, getting maximum points on the second KOM here of today's stage 14. This causes a big split, and then we start seeing a couple more guys bridging across. Before you know it, it's 23 guys at the front of the field, and it took 40 kilometers more or less of racing on today's stage 14 of the Tour de France. Was an exciting first 40 kilometers of today's stage, especially with Tadej Pogačar putting the knife to Jonas Vingegaard in the race leader's yellow jersey. We saw Jumbo-Visma have all kinds of problems because Primož Roglič was split off during that first 40 kilometers. UAE team members weren't doing much better because they had teammates split off back there too. Now when we look after that group of 23, take a look at what's left of the peloton. We're talking about a fourth maybe of the peloton left at the front when they finally turned off the gas right here. That'll get time for Jumbo-Visma to get their team that got dropped in the back all the way back up to the front. Now Jumbo-Visma is going to start controlling the pace here on stage 14. Up front in that group of 23 riders, there's multiple teams up there that have big numbers. 3 riders from Bora Hansgrohe are up there. Felix Großschartner's up there. Leonard Kamna, who put on a show on a couple of the mountain stages before, and then they got some help there from Patrick Conrad. 3 guys from Bora Hansgrohe means you need to pay attention to the tactics that Bora Hansgrohe could do throughout this stage 14. There's other teams though with 3 back there because EF Education, Alberto Bettiol, Nielsen Palace, and then they got the Colombian Rigoberto Urán. So we're looking at good numbers and lots of different tactics to look forward to here on stage 14. And there's a couple other teams that have at least 2 riders in there, like Trek Segafredo's Quinn Simmons, who basically started this break of 23, and he's got a teammate, Bach Mollema. We all know Mollema wins Tour de France stages and Grand Tour stages because he's got one of every one on his resume. This group of 23 starts putting some pressure. And when we look back there at Jumbo-Visma, they're just setting tempo on the front. Everything's under control at this point in time because when we go back to the group of 23, the best rider up here on general classification, just about north of 15 minutes, and it's Louis Meintjes, the Intermarché rider. Now remember, Intermarché does some magical stuff throughout the last season here in 2022, and they were solid last year in 2021, taking the race leader's yellow jersey at the Vuelta on a couple stages, if I remember correctly. Now we get back into the action here. I want to point out a couple more guys in this group of 23 because it's Michael Matthews Bike Exchange up there, and they got some other company because Lotto Soudal, Andreas Krohn, he's up here, while his teammate and sprinter Caleb Ewan's having a terrible day here on stage 14, but he's got 3 teammates wrapped around him trying to help him make the time cut. He'll lose a bunch of time back there, the sprinter for Lotto Soudal, but he will make the time cut when it's all said and done at the end of stage 14. Now let's get back up to the action here because with about 70 kilometers to go, like I said, this stage 14 has a little bit of everything, a lot of attacking, and now it's got the crosswind sections as we start seeing the peloton get a little interesting back there with Echelon starting to form from the team up front, Jumbo-Visma pulling hard. We start looking up to the group of 23 now, and they're getting on to the 3rd categorized climb here. When they're going up this climb, guess what? It's Gasink again who's attacking for the KOM points. He'll go over taking first place points with 3 KOMs passing here at the Tour de France stage 14. And then it's Quinn Simmons, Trek Segafredo that's throwing in the next attack. Let me remind you guys, it was this duo right here that started this 23-man break. And now with the attack of Quinn Simmons, we're going to see the next attack with about 52 kilometers to go. It's Michael Matthews from Bike Exchange going solo. Now, yesterday I said they were a day late and $1 short, but today they're right on time because Michael Matthews, he knows what he needs to do. When you look at this group of 23, riders like Stefan Kuhn in here, they're fast and powerful riders, but you got other riders like his teammate Thibaut Pinot who can climb. Louis Meintjes, we know he can climb because he's up solid in the top 15 on the general classification. So there's all kinds of different chemistry here, and Michael Matthews knows he's got speed, he's got power, and if he can get over the number 4 KOM climb here on stage 14, that it's all downhill for about the next 25 kilometers until you start the last 3 kilometers of hell here on stage 14. Michael Matthews is up there pulling hard and just spit hanging down off his chin, and we still got 50 kilometers to go. Michael Matthews, man, are you putting on a show right here on stage 14. He'll have some company, but it'll take about 7-8 kilometers before 3 more riders come up. Those 3 riders, Sanchez, powerhouse, Andreas Krohn from Lotto Soudal. Let me remind you again, it's Caleb Ewan off the back from Lotto, and Lotto up front, Andreas Krohn trying to win here on stage 14. I told you guys there was 3 in this front group, and it's Felix Großschartner that's now in the front group of 4, and his 2 teammates, Patrick Conrad and Leonard Kamna, are doing everything they can to cause chaos in the back group that's chasing. Those 4 up front, they're going hard, but Felix Großschartner, in my mind, I've seen him hit the front maybe once or twice, but not very often. He's sitting on the front, and his teammates, like I said, are causing chaos in the back. Now we'll see Stefan Kuhn. He'll get on the front. We all know the MO here for Stefan Kuhn. He's going to go into this 4th categorized climb, trying to bring the gap back down to a more manageable size because it's getting right up there around 40 seconds. And he's got teammate Thibaut Pinot, who's won stages at the Tour de France. And at one point in time in 2019, Thibaut Pinot looked like he could win the Tour de France. Now Stefan Kuhn pulls into the next KOM as hard as he can, and then it's Alberto Bettiol from EF Education that throws in attack going up this KOM climb. He's trying to close the gap, but he can't get it done, and we're starting to see damage back there as the groups are all chasing each other. Marc Soler, who started the climb here at the very back, now has found his way to the middle, and he's trying to bridge up to that group of, let's call it about 5, 6, 7 riders up there who are still trying to close the gap up to the 4 in front. The group of 4 in front, they'll go over the penultimate climb with about a 20-second gap on the group behind chasing hard. And when they start the descent, you know there's some power in this front group with Luis Leon Sanchez, Andreas Krohn, and then Michael Matthews. Let me remind you again, Felix Grossschartner is just sitting on. So the group back there is really only chasing 3 up front. And then with about 25 kilometers to go on the real fast left-hand turn, Andreas Krohn from Lotto Sudal, he's going to blow the front tire, and luckily the rider gets it under control off into the gravel but does not crash. Now what's going to happen when we look at this group of 3? Felix Grossschartner knows he needs to start pulling right now because the gap is down to 20 seconds. With Felix Grossschartner taking pulls, now all of a sudden that gap starts to extend as we see just going over the penultimate KOM. There's more attacks back there because it's Rigoberto Urán as we were coming up the final part of this climb that started throwing in attack for EF Education. That's sending Alberto Bettiol in the hurt locker because he was already on the front attacking before Rigoberto Urán as he finds his way back up, and they go over the penultimate climb. It's starting to all regroup back there with a group of about 15 riders that have made it over the penultimate climb, and we still got about 15 kilometers to go. Problem is, the group of 3 up front, they still got a gap. Now let's jump back to the peloton because there's some action happening back there. We went through the last plateaus and there was crosswinds. Jumbo-Visma now had let the gap go out to about 14 minutes. Now they're going full gas because they got Louis Meintjes up in that front group who could possibly steal the race leader's yellow jersey, if you could believe it or not. When this race started with 23 riders in the front group, no one thought Louis Meintjes would be much of a threat, but Jumbo-Visma had let that gap go out quite a bit. Now they're going full gas back there with Primož Roglič, and he's drilling it as hard as he can. Primož Roglič will finally drop off the front, and you look at the peloton back there of GC favorites, we're down to about 25 guys, and it's Wout van Aert getting on the front. Wout van Aert, the Belgian rider who's worn the race leader's yellow jersey here, won 2 stages for Jumbo-Visma. Now he's on the front working for the race leader's yellow jersey, trying to do damage control to that front group up front with Louis Meintjes, who's pulling on the front, trying to win the stage, trying to gain time on the group behind, and possibly even thinking about the race leader's jersey at this point in time in the race. Up front with 3 kilometers to go, that group of 3 will start the climb with about a 30-second, 25-second gap on the chase group behind, and it's Michael Matthews from Bike Exchange that rides both of his breakaway companions off the wheel. Felix Grossschartner, he tried hard to close the gap up to Michael Matthews, but Michael Matthews is having none of it. He wants to go solo. Michael Matthews has a lot of second places in the last 5, 6 seasons of his career, and he doesn't want another second place on today's famous climb here up Mende to the airport finish. Now Michael Matthews accelerating. He knows he's just got a couple kilometers of pain and suffering here on Mende if he wants to win the stage. He gets that gap, but now when we look behind, when that chase group started to climb, like I said, they're about 25 seconds. Alberto Bettiol from EF Education has found some legs. He's dropped everyone, and now he's gone past Felix Grossschartner and Samuel Sanchez. He's on his way going up solo to Michael Matthews, but is he going to be able to close the gap? Michael Matthews, I'm sure, knows he's coming. He's pushing as hard as he can. At 1.5 kilometers to go, the 2 riders come together. EF Education's Alberto Bettiol's locked on the Michael Matthews wheel. He only sits there for 200-300 meters, and then he's going to throw an attack on the Bike Exchange rider because he wants to win here solo too. When we start looking at the gap there, Michael Matthews is suffering with every pedal stroke. He's holding on to the wheel of Alberto Bettiol, and then the rubber band snaps, and Michael Matthews opens the gap with about 1 kilometer to go. Now all of a sudden, 900 meters to go, Michael Matthews has found some energy and return of form. He's got a 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th win here on Mende to try to win again. He doesn't want another 2nd place. And let me remind you guys, he attacked at 52 kilometers to go, and at 45 he was already drooling from the chin. Now he's been dropped. Now he's coming back. He's on the wheel of EF Education rider's wheel till about 400 meters to go. Then Michael Matthews said, I've had enough 2nd places, throws in a massive acceleration, gaps Bettiol by the summit here on Mende, and will solo down the descent and take a stellar victory here at stage 14. Michael Matthews, thank you for the show. When the race began, like I said, that big group that went off before the first KOM, I was almost in tears at NBC thinking, wow, are these guys really going to get off this easy on such a legendary mid-stage here at the Tour de France that finishes up the famous climb Mende? I don't think so. Michael Matthews lit everything up for us and kept us glued to our seats. As Michael Matthews won the stage, Alberto Bettiol crossed the stage for second, and third was Thibaut Pinot. Now fourth on the stage was Soler from UAE Team Emirates. I didn't much appreciate the tactics from Soler on today's stage, but I'll get back to that after we go down the hill because the GC favorites are just starting and rounding the bend here with 3 kilometers to go up Mende. Now we start seeing up front, it's Sepp Kuss, but he doesn't have good legs today. He'll come off quick. And then the other American, Brandon McNulty, UAE Team Emirates, will get on the front, setting a vicious tempo. Next to come up, Rafael Michael will set a great tempo up here, and he's thinning out all the GC favorites. Not that there was much left because Jumbo-Visma already thinned it up with Wout van Aert when we went up the penultimate climb. Now it's time for Tadej Pogačar to see if he can gain some time back here on Jonas Vingegaard, the race leader of the Tour de France. He throws in an attack about 1 kilometer into this climb. At every moment in time going up the next 2 kilometers, Jonas Vingegaard looks solid and will not come off the wheel of Tadej Pogačar. Tadej Pogačar puts in about 2 solid, big accelerations along, of course, with the 2 kilometer efforts, and he'll take both those riders all the way up to the KOM here with just 2 kilometers to go before the finish of today's stage. Now he'll drop over the backside and head down to the airport, staying at the front, and then he'll do 1 big acceleration with about 200 meters to go to cross the line just in front of Jonas Vingegaard. We look further back though, and it's Geraint Thomas that lost about 20 seconds on today's stage, but he'll still hold third on the GC podium. And when I break down the tactics of today's stage, there's a few things I don't like, of course, because it's the butterfly effect. It's what I do. I like to talk about the tactics. The main one, Jumbo-Visma pulling so hard into the finish, that's got to make for some tired legs on the teammates there. And we got a couple days rest, I know, kind of coming maybe possibly with tomorrow, then a rest day after that. But then we're in the big, bad mountains again here at the Tour de France. So I don't like being over aggressive. And when we're talking about this last 3 kilometer climb here to the finish, more or less, Jonas Vingegaard was left basically on his own once Sepp Kuss pulled off. So I don't like beating up your team too much. Now I understand the race leader's yellow jersey was a little bit in threat with Louis Minquez up there, but if you just set a little bit steadier tempo throughout the stage, that'll keep everything under control. When I look at UAE Team Emirates, Marc Soler, I understand the tactic of going away in that group of 23, and I'm okay with that. I don't like it. It's not my way of doing it, but I'm okay with it. What I really don't like is if you don't have the possibility of winning the stage, you gotta wait. If you're Marc Soler at the top of the summit here on the last KOM, you gotta wait and see if it's Tadej Pogačar that can drop Jonas Vingegaard. Can you imagine when you go over this KOM in probably 4th position, Marc Soler had no chance of winning today's stage with the ride up there of Michael Matthews being so spectacular. So at that point in time, even though the gap is still talking 12, 13 minutes to Marc Soler, Marc, you got to pull out. Once you hit the KOM line, just come to a stop, click out, sit on your top tube, start drinking your water, eat some snacks. Cross your fingers that Tadej Pogačar might be going solo up this climb without Jonas Vingegaard. That didn't happen, but could you imagine what if it did happen? Instead, Soler goes all the way to the line to get 4th and doesn't wait for Tadej Pogačar. Tadej Pogačar loved all his tactics, loved UAE tactics when this climb started proper of drilling in at the bottom. Tadej Pogačar was perfect, beautiful even with his tactics all the way to the top of the KOM. At this point in time, if I was Tadej Pogačar, once I get to the KOM, if I can't drop Jonas back there, race leader for this year's Tour de France, I just shut the throttle off. I wait. I have all the other GC favorites, Romain Bardet, Geraint Thomas, Adam Yates, Gaudu from FDJ, who had gotten dropped on this climb. Wait for those guys to come back. They'll come back. Maybe they jump and attack Jonas, and that puts Jonas on the front. Anytime you can get more guys on the general classification for these upcoming mountain stages in the 3rd week here of the Tour de France, that is better for Tadej Pogačar if your sole focus is trying to put Jonas under pressure. Now, what do I mean by that? It means that if these other riders, Geraint Thomas, Adam Yates especially, if they can get back up here, that means they might be able to attack later if Tadej Pogačar can't get rid of Jonas Vingegaard throughout these next mountain stages. You want GC guys there because then you can always sit up, let those GC guys come back, and just like on this descent here into the final of stage 14, if Adam Yates, Geraint Thomas gets back. You know they're going to attack Jonas. Then Jonas has to ride the front. Now today, as I know, you're like Chris. It's only 1.5K. But if they jump, all of a sudden Jonas has to pull 100% to keep G. Thomas in check. He's pulling on the front. Tadej Pogačar can possibly jump 200, 400 meters before the line, gain a few seconds, and you can take that same strategy later into these mountain stages. Sure, Tadej Pogačar might lose second on the general classification to Geraint Thomas, but if you can't beat Geraint Thomas, you're definitely not going to beat Jonas Vingegaard wearing race leader's yellow jersey. So if you're gambling 100% for the race win here at the Tour de France and you can't get rid of Jonas, Tadej Pogačar over every summit, shut the gas off, let some of the other GC guys come into play, and hope it's a tactical battle. Maybe that'll give you some kind of advantage here later in the stages of the mountain stages of the Tour de France. Make sure you guys like and subscribe because there's more races coming. Tomorrow should be a sprint finish. Could be all the sprinters that were too tired because Caleb Ewan's crashed hard and chased all day today. So maybe it's a day for the breakaways on tomorrow's Carcassonne finish. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next edition.